Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Monday Morning Live. So if you've not joined us before, I'm Sophie and this is Lisa.
Hello.
We have been chatting about all things faith, life, different things going on in the church, different things you've been up to at home. So we're really happy to be with you. It's the 26th of October. It seems as though the autumn is just flying by. Like, I feel as though it was September and I blinked and now we're almost in November and it may as well just be Christmas. It's flying by. But today we thought we would talk especially about All Saints' Day, which is coming up next week on Sunday.
Yeah.
On Sunday we've got All Saints' Day, which is a great feast day in the church. So, Lisa, have you been up to anything exciting over the weekend?
Not too much, just kind of doing chores and catching up on things like that. How about you?
The weather was a bit miserable for anything exciting, wasn't it? The most exciting thing we did this week was we went to a new farm shop near us, which sounds like a very grown-up thing to do, is to go to a farm shop, but it was nice, somewhere different to go. We can't really go out and do much at the moment, can we?
Right, yeah.
But like we said, at the weekend, it's going to be All Saints' Day, and this is something that I love celebrating, but perhaps didn't particularly know about it until I got a bit older and started learning about the church year for myself. So on All Saints' Day, we pay special attention to the saints, who are the people that we know who are in heaven. But how does one become a saint? So we have a little video here that we'd love to show you about how you can become a saint.
A saint is a woman or a man who lived on earth and is now in heaven. And this can include anybody. So it could also be your grandmother or somebody else who died before us. The Greek word hagios means a holy thing. It's connected to the Latin word sanctus, which is the origin of our word saint. The saints in heaven were once ordinary sinful people just like you and me. But with the help of God, they managed to place the love of God above anything else. They chose consciously not to go against the love of God, but to follow the love of God. In daily life, we usually use the word saint for those people who have been declared a saint by the church. They are not made a saint by the church. And that's important because that means we can pray to them and we can follow their example. To be sure that somebody is in heaven, the church asks for a miracle from God. And this is documented by scientists and doctors, and they will decide that this is something they cannot explain scientifically or medically. Somebody was healed by a miracle. To make things a bit confusing, St. Paul refers with the word saint to any person who believes in God, any Christian follower of Jesus. And that is because it is the vocation of each of us to become a saint. We all have one single destination, which is heaven. And whether we go to heaven is depending on our own actions, our own words, our own decisions. Basically, we have a free choice between accepting the love of God and rejecting it. If we accept the love of God and live in love with God and the people around us, our daily lives will be different, and then our future is to be with God forever in heaven, together with all the angels and the saints.
Favorite things about being Catholic, because they're like friends in heaven, that just like our friends here on earth, we can like look up to and we can turn to for advice. So Lisa, who is one of your favorite saints?
Well, so we spoke about this last week and talked about John Paul II, so I'll have to stick with him, I think. Yeah, he's my guy.
And why, very briefly, because we talked about him loads last week if you were watching, but lots of people weren't watching, so why is he one of your favorite saints? What's so special about him?
I think just how much he loved people, especially young people. And I think people really saw him as really kind of like Jesus walking on this earth, really. I mean, he was just such a influential figure in our century and accomplished so many things. There's really hasn't been anyone like him this century, I don't think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too. And what's really great is that like there's now people that have been declared saints that were alive in our lifetime. So it's not like we're learning about somebody from a history book. You can watch TV footage of them, and you can see them on YouTube, and you can listen to their real voice and see real pictures of them, which is just amazing.
It is
I think for me, I would probably normally say John Paul II as well, but we've chatted about him a lot. So I think one of my other favourite saints is Saint Maximilian Kolbe, who was a Polish priest, and he lived a very saintly life throughout his whole life, spreading the gospel message, trying to create devotion to Mary as well in his communities. He like founded monasteries and traveled the world sharing the good news, but then he was arrested and taken to a concentration camp, and eventually gave his life in the place of a father, so the father could go back to his family. And Maximilian Kolbe actually gave his life, which again is another amazing example of sacrifice and really living a life how Jesus would have. I don't know if I would have had the courage to do that, but his whole life, I think, is a good example for us. We actually got engaged on St. Maximilian Kolbe's feast day. So
did you? Okay.
rather than trying to remember our engagement anniversary, I always just Google Maximilian Kolbe feast day, because I know that was the day. I think it's the 14th of August, so I've got a while until I have to remember again. But often saints are given something to be the patron of. So people will say, oh, this saint stood for this, or we associate with this with their life, so we can turn to them in particular times of need. So I did a little Google search for unusual and interesting patron saints, and I think I came up with some good ones. So for anyone who is against, if anyone is afraid of wasps, Saint Friard is your saint. And I was just telling them before, I have an uncle who's very tall and very large and is terrified of wasps and will run right to the other end of the garden to get away from one. So maybe I'll try and find a picture of Saint Friard and give it to him. Also, maybe a very appropriate one for today, because it is chucking it down here in Warrington. Saint Theodore of Sikion is, you either pray that he will help the rain come or will help the rain go away. I would quite like the rain to go away today, because I would like to go out for a walk later. And for all of the students out there, Saint Vitus for oversleeping. We thought that he might be a good one for any students watching. And finally, for altar servers, now earlier in the year, just before we went into lockdown, we were able to meet loads of wonderful altar servers from across the diocese. And your patron saint, if you are an altar server, is Saint John Birchmans. So if any of those stood out to you, you could do a Google search. But I think it's safe to say, Lisa, there's pretty much a patron saint for anything and everything. So if you're struggling with something, you can just do a Google search and you can ask that saint like you would a friend to help you out in that situation. Now, Lisa, I have a question for you. If you were to be the patron saint of something, what would it be?
Right. So my silly answer would be, I'd love to be the patron saint of superheroes. They could all ask me for their prayers, and I would be happy to pray for them. But my serious answer would be probably patience. It just feels like I'm either waiting for something to happen or praying for that to happen, and just constantly kind of in that mode of having to be patient.
That's a pretty good answer. I think in the spirit of 2020, I would maybe be considered the patron saint of loungewear, because it's all I've worn for the last few months. It just feels as though, and it's something that I'm very passionate about as well, low maintenance fashion. If it's not comfortable, don't want to be wearing that. So maybe I could be the patron saint of like low maintenance fashion. And maybe, I don't know, a serious one. That's something I'll have to think about. I'd only thought of a silly answer.
Yeah.
Well, that's definitely something we can think about, is what could I be the patron saint of? But there is a process to be declared a saint that the church takes very seriously. So we have, the saints are anybody who is in heaven with God. That's the definition of a saint. But there's certain people that the church has said, we know for sure that these people are in heaven because of the life that they led. Like if you go to a church that's named after a particular saint, the church has gone through this process for them. So we're going to show you a little clip here that's going to explain how the church declares a saint.
Did you ever want to know how the Catholic Church declares someone a saint? You probably know that periodically the Catholic Church recognizes new holy men and women as its official saints. But what exactly are the steps to canonization, that is, being named a saint by the Catholic Church? The process has actually changed throughout history. In the first centuries, it was by acclamation of the community that sainthood was pronounced, sort of a spiritual popularity contest. But because the stories of some of the early saints' lives were later found to be exaggerated or even purely legend, this method eventually gave way to a more structured process. So, in the Middle Ages, a new path to sainthood was prescribed, a set of rules we pretty much still use today. Here's what happens. First of all, and probably most obvious, a person has to have died in order to be considered an official saint in the Church, because we believe the saints are in heaven with God. So at some point after their death, some fan of the potential saint, like someone who knew them or a member of their religious community, asks their local bishop to begin the cause for canonization. Once the bishop agrees, the potential saint receives the title Servant of God. And a formal review is undertaken at the local level, guided by historians and theologians. Then the bishop may decide to send the cause to Rome. The Congregation for the Causes of Saints, an entire department at the Vatican devoted to this sainthood process, then determines if the person in question demonstrated heroic sanctity in their lifetime worthy of imitation. That is, did they live a life marked by virtuous actions, doing good works out of love of God and neighbor? If so, with the Pope's decree, they are declared venerable. Next, the search begins for proof that a miracle occurred through the person's intercession since they have died. Note that this is not a miracle that happened while they were alive, like cases where saints have reportedly levitated or experienced the wounds of Christ. In the eyes of the Church, a miracle attributed to someone after their death is evidence that the person is indeed in heaven with God, interceding for us here on earth. Catholic belief is that it is actually God that performs the miracle. The potential saint is essentially being credited with an assist, like in hockey or basketball. The process of confirming that a miracle truly happened is exhaustive. Miracles for sainthood are not limited to medical cures, but in practice they almost always are. And a miraculous cure must meet 3 stringent criteria. It must be instantaneous, lasting, and unexplainable. Instantaneous, meaning that a person goes from very sick or terminally ill to healthy in a very short period of time, usually days. Lasting, meaning it was not a fluke or a brief remission, the cure needs to last for at least a year or more. And unexplainable, meaning that the person's return to health may not be even possibly attributed to any other course of treatment. To verify these criteria, doctors and scientific experts scrutinize medical records and weigh in on the credibility of these claims. Even non-religious skeptics are invited to try to disprove the miracle. On top of all that, there must be evidence that people prayed for the intercession of the would-be saint before the miraculous cure happened, and that they did not enlist the help of any other saint. It's okay to pray to God or Jesus directly, of course, but you can hedge your bets by also including ringers like St. Jude or even the Virgin Mary. So once there is proof that a miracle resulted from the aspiring saint's intercession, the person may now be officially called blessed. The ceremony during which this happens is called beatification and is most often held in the local diocese that has promoted this person's sainthood cause. At this point, a feast day is chosen to be celebrated in certain places having to do with this blessed person, and churches and schools may be named after them. And now the search begins for a second miracle that can be shown to have happened after the beatification, using the same stringent process just described. Once miracle number 2 is verified and approved by Rome, the person may then be officially canonized, which means that the Pope declares them a saint. This ceremony almost always happens at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome and is presided over by the Pope himself. Once canonized, a saint is recognized by the Universal Church, and their feast day may be celebrated all around the world. Now that's the official process. Of course, there are always exceptions. For instance, a martyr, someone who has died voluntarily as a witness to the faith, requires only 1 miracle for canonization, not 2. The Pope can also decide to dispense with the second miracle even for a non-martyr, as Pope Francis did with Pope John XXIII. And then there's equivalent canonization, in which someone who is unofficially considered a saint in certain cultures or countries can be officially declared one through papal decree rather than through the full canonization process. It's important to note that the Catholic Church does not believe that through any of these processes a holy person becomes a saint. We are merely recognizing their sainthood. It's our earthly way of officially affirming that they are indeed in heaven with God, hearing and assisting with our prayers. And now you know how the Catholic Church officially goes about declaring someone a saint.
One of the great things about the communion of saints is it's not just one sort of person that is considered to be a saint. There's so many different saints out there, too many for us to count. And so there's somebody really for everybody to learn about. So we thought we'd share with you a few examples of young people who became saints. So Lisa, do you want to share the first one with us?
Yes. So this saint, she was 24 when she died. She is the first Native American born saint in the 1400s. And her name is Saint Kateri, it's her first name, and then Tekakwitha is her surname. I think at the time, she pronounced her name Kateri, but that just sounds like a home for cats, doesn't it? So Saint Kateri, she was the daughter of the chief of her tribe. She was of the Mohawks, and they had missionaries that came, and she became a Christian. Then there was, I think, some smallpox or something came to her village and killed her family. So she was taken in by relatives, I think, and was really persecuted for being a Christian. And I wound up, I think, just kind of going into exile, trying to find a place where she would be accepted as a Christian. And while she was there, where she finally wound up, her reputation for sanctity was such that she became known as the Lily of the Mohawks. And let's see, I think she was canonized in 2012, so not that long ago. And that's Saint Kateri.
Yeah, she is a really great example of like how we can be holy as young people, and how it's not just for those who have been part of the faith for a long time. You know, she converted as a young person and lived out her faith. I'm going to share about Saint Dominic Savio, who was a young boy who offered all of his suffering, and he did have great suffering, to Mary. And what I like about Saint Dominic Savio is that he really shows the example that other people can have on our lives, because he was taught by Saint John Bosco. So if it wasn't for Don Bosco, then Dominic Savio probably wouldn't have become a saint. So it just really shows us the influence that other people can have on our lives. And because of his influence, St. Dominic Savio chose to be close to the most abandoned and infirm of his fellow young people. And he died in 1857 at just 14, which I think is amazing, that he achieved such holiness in his young life that he was able to become a saint.
Yeah.
Okay, so our next one, Lisa.
Okay, so that's Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati. So he was a young Italian man. He also died when he was 24. Let's see. So his family were quite wealthy and kind of influential. His father was the owner of a big newspaper in their region, in their area. And Pier Giorgio, he loved life. He loved all his friendships. He loved being a bit of a jokester, but at the same time, he was also a very humble person. He loved helping people, especially people who were poor or sick. And let's see. So a little prank that I read about him that I thought was kind of funny was one of his friends. She had made I don't know, this woman that had become kind of like her patron, so kind of an influential person. And so he gave his friend some sweets to give to this older woman who became her patron. And they were going on a train journey or something or another. He said, "This is for you and for your friend to share." So what he had done is with the sweets, he had somehow or another, like maybe taken a needle and thread and it kind of connected them all together. So that way when she offered one to her friend, they would all come out in a, in a string, which I thought was a silly, kind of harmless little joke. But at any rate, it just sounds exactly like Pier Giorgio, larger than life, an athlete, and just was a lovely person from all accounts.
Yeah, I like Pier Giorgio because he sort of used his interest and his passions to share the gospel and to share Jesus with his friends. Like the stories of him where he would invite his friends on a hike, and then when they were like midway through the hike, he'd be like, oh, let's just sit down and read some of the Bible. And then his friends would just go along with it because he was their friend, and you listen to what your friends have to say. And he was just like a normal guy living a normal life, but in an extraordinary way. And similar to that, living out her life. And Blessed Chiara Badano is someone that I've really grown to have as a friend in heaven. She was a young girl who she was sort of just like your average girl at youth group, but she really got into her faith. She started going on like retreats and pilgrimages and things. But then she was diagnosed with cancer, and she offered all of her suffering to Jesus. But she was so happy and joyful, even when she was suffering. When people came to visit her, they would leave feeling happier themselves. It wasn't like people would come and visit and pity her. They left thinking, wow, like I've really encountered somebody holy who is really close to Jesus right now. And I think that's so incredible, because I'm not very good at enduring suffering. Like I tend to complain and I don't really like it. I don't really like to be uncomfortable. Hence why I'd be the patron saint of comfort clothes. But she really used her suffering to like lead others to Jesus, and she died at a very young age, but her life still inspires people now. We're talking about her. And again, another person that was alive, she died just before I was born, but there's still photos of her. There's footage of her talking to her friends. There's voice clips of her. So I just think that's really cool that we can actually like learn about these people who were around not that long ago, but the church says these are such good examples of holiness for us. Now, last year, Pope Francis wrote a letter to young people called Christus Vivit, where he spoke about all of these saints, where he was very clear, and he said that we're not to copy these saints. We don't need another Pier Giorgio. We don't need another Dominic Savio. We don't need another Kateri. What we need is for everybody to become a saint in their own way, because God calls us all in our own unique way. So it made me think that, like, what's one thing that I can do with my life to become a saint? So Lisa, what do you think, what's one thing that you could do in your life to become a saint?
Well, so I think, when you're thinking about, being a saint, that just sounds so daunting. But it would be if you tried to do it on your own steam. But I think for me is just to acknowledge that I really can't do it on my own steam, that I really need to ask the Holy Spirit to make up for whatever I'm lacking in. So that way I can be able to love that person that isn't very lovable, or be kind to that person who's horrible and mean. Because on my own, I can't do that, but the Holy Spirit can. And just to acknowledge that and to allow that to happen, to invite the Holy Spirit in to be able to do that. I for me, that's one thing I think I would do.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I think for me as well, like you say, it can be a bit daunting. You read the lives of the saints and you think like, wow, like it kind of seems as though they never put a foot wrong. But really, the saints did put a foot wrong. They didn't live absolutely perfect lives. They were human, and we all make mistakes. And I think that's one thing that I could learn from the lives of the saints to help myself grow in holiness, is that when I do make a mistake, just to say sorry and to move on and try again. Every day is a new day, just living in that day, trying to be holy today. I can't worry about being holy tomorrow or the next day or yesterday. Just, asking for forgiveness, what we've done wrong, and just moving on and trying to be holy right now in the present moment. So like we said, everyone is being called to be saints in their own way. And recently I spoke to my friend Jade, who is trying to live her life in that way, doing whatever God calls her to, but also trying to encourage others to do that. So it's not a very long interview here, but I'd love it if you would listen to Jade with me and to hear what she has to say. Hi Jade, it's really great to have you with us today. I'm really glad that you could join us, and I'm excited to listen to what you have to say to us today.
Yeah, thank you for asking me to be a part of this.
So to start off with, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, like who you are, where you're from, and all those kinds of things?
Yep, so my name's Jade, I'm 28 and I'm from Leeds. I grew up in Leeds and then I went to uni in Manchester, lived in America for a little while, and then I found myself back here in lockdown. So yeah, I work for a Catholic charity called Youth 2000, and in normal times we run retreats that help young people to just connect with each other and to connect with Christ, especially through the Eucharist. So yeah, that's a really big part of what I spend my time doing.
I'm nodding as if that's like the first time that I've heard about this, but really I've been involved in Youth 2000 since I was 18. So I'm like, yeah, but really I know what it's like. But if you are watching this and you've not heard of them, then definitely check out their social media and stuff, because you've got loads of stuff going on to get involved with during lockdown as well. So that's been really nice to have something to connect with. So you said that you lived in America for a few years. That's very different to living in Leeds. So can you tell us a little bit about that and what your experience was like?
Yeah, so I'll rewind a little bit. When I was at uni, I did a semester abroad in Tennessee, and I just loved it. I loved the culture, I loved the people, I loved the food. And I always kind of knew I'd go back there. And then a couple of my friends did a gap year with NET Ministries, so they're National Evangelization Teams. They do 5 weeks of formation, then you put onto a team and you travel around the country leading retreats for people in high school and middle school, so sort of like our high school age. And I ended up, my gap year turned into 3 years. Because I just had such an amazing experience of meeting people and growing in my own faith, and just getting to see loads. I went to 41 states in my time there, which I think is more than most Americans, to be honest.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a great time.
If people don't know watching this, most of the people that we've had brought into Monday Morning Live are one of my connections through NET Ministries, because you get to meet so many different people through. So you worked for them in America, I worked with them in Ireland, and you get to meet so many different people from like so many different walks of life. It's so interesting to get to know everyone and grow in faith, and like you say, meet lots of young people as well and work with them. I think it's really interesting because when we hear the word missionary, you often think of like those old films where like some priest will go off to a country and talk to people, but actually like you can consider yourself to be a missionary when you're doing work like that and being out on mission. So that's really cool. It's like a different title for us. So is there a specific way that God has changed your life through all your different experiences?
Yeah, gosh. I feel like I could say a lot for this one, because I think that God has changed my life drastically over the last sort of 10 years since I first got involved in my faith. I think before I was Catholic, I just was doing everything that the world told me would make me happy. And I found myself in a position where I felt like I'd been lied to, like all these things actually weren't fulfilling me and I was missing something. And it was when I first went to a Catholic retreat and I met loads of other young Catholics, and they were genuinely happy, like in a way that my friends from school and my friends at home just weren't. And I just wanted what they had. And I think the common factor with all of them was that they had this relationship with God. So that it was quite a gradual thing for me. I wouldn't say there was a big, massive moment where God appeared to me in a burning bush, but it was really, really gradual. that I just started to try following, what our faith says and what God asks of us. And I gradually felt like my life changed. I experienced healing. I experienced just quite small things. Like I was always quite a shy child. And I noticed that I grew a lot in confidence of just being able to speak to people and, do things like this. I would have never dreamed like I'd feel confident and be able to do this.
Yeah, that's really great. I think a lot of the people that we've spoken to over the last few weeks on Monday Morning Live have said similar things, that getting involved in their faith helped them to understand who they were as a person, which makes sense because God made us and knows us and loves us. So if we get to know him more, then we get to know ourselves more. And that's really great to just take a little step out your comfort zone and big things can happen. So what's your advice for young people who are trying to live out their faith, especially at the moment, but just in general as well?
Yeah. Gosh, yeah, I think we hear a lot how difficult it is to be a young Catholic and how we're a minority and all these things. But I actually think it's such a joy as well. It's such a privilege that we get to hold hope. And especially at times like this when people are really struggling, people really don't have a lot of hope. So I think there's real joy to be a young Catholic and to not forget that as well, even though it can be difficult. So I think probably what I'd say to a young person trying to live out their faith now is that the little moments are really important. So I think sometimes we can get bogged down thinking about the big picture, like what am I called to? What's my vocation? Am I a good enough Catholic? Am I good enough in general? And actually, God thinks you're good enough. He's chose us and he's got a specific mission for each of us. And I think as long as we choose him every day and turn back to him maybe when we've not chose him, then our faith will grow. So yeah, I think it's just the little things, choosing God in the really small things every day, like helping around the house, changing the conversation when friends are talking badly about someone, or being aware what we're filling our minds with when we're looking online and things like that. So yeah, just creating that space by choosing God in the small things.
That's really great advice. And especially at the moment when we can't really plan into the future, like there's, we're really struggling to even know what we're doing next week, never mind next year at the moment, that just focusing on what's around us and what's in front of us, we can make a massive difference there and follow Jesus even right here today. That's given me some inspiration to think about what I'm going to do for the rest of the day. Maybe not complain and just veg out for the evening, but actually to maybe make a choice to make a difference.
Yeah, with all that extra time we've got.
Yeah, I know. Even with all the extra time, I still choose to just not do anything of value. But thank you so much for joining us today. I really do appreciate it. And a story for people back home, we can actually attribute Jade to this ring on my finger, because long before I met my husband, Jade had met him and actually put us into a Facebook group of people that she knew that were off to live in Ireland. So long before we got married, Jade actually, which we forgot about until we were about to get married.
Yeah, and at Sophie and Caleb's wedding, I did make a point of telling everybody this story to claim their marriage.
I have a lot to thank Jade for, not just your inspiration and witnessing the faith, but also thank you for my life and my vocation. But thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll be praying for you and your ministry, and for everything that you 2000 have got going on, and I'm sure you'll be praying for us and our young people as well. So thank you so much, Jade, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Sophie. Bye.
Move on and wrap up our time together this morning, and we're going to have a little look at the gospel that we heard at Mass yesterday, which actually fits in really well with what we've been talking about today. So I really love it when that happens. So I'll read the first bit of the scripture. Lisa's going to read the second bit, and then we'll move into our weekly challenge. So this is what we heard at Mass yesterday. Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question: "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?"
Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments."
Now, that does seem like very good advice for us on our path to holiness and trying to become saints. So a challenge for this week for you watching and for us as well could be do one thing to accept that call to holiness. Like Lisa and I were talking about, maybe it's just to live in the moment. Maybe it's you're going to reach out to someone. Maybe it's you're going to spend a bit more time in prayer. Just try and commit to one thing this week to grow in holiness. And then maybe another challenge is learn about one new saint. Their lives are so inspiring and can call us to do so much greater with our lives. Try and just a quick Google search, and then maybe when it comes to All Saints Day, you can share your new knowledge with somebody else. So Lisa, what else is coming up this week on our social media?
Let's see, Wednesday is the Clergy Cafe. So we're going to be talking with hopefully Sandy, Father Chris, and Father David about Lourdes, because there's some changes afoot, I believe. So we'll have a conversation about that on Wednesday, 4 p.m.
That'd be really great. And then you can also catch up on all of the other YouTube videos, including the God Speaks, where Lisa and Tom are leading us through prayer with scripture, which has been really nice to take a few minutes each week just to sit and watch that for me. So hopefully you will enjoy that home. So thank you so much for joining us today, for watching us live. Thank you, Lisa, for coming to talk to me, and we will see you next Monday morning. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.